haunting faces of Neolithic sisters, 3D reconstructions, ancient labor exploitation. They were sisters, they were minors, and they were almost certainly exploited, yet until now no one has looked them in the eye. Imagine staring into the faces of two women who lived, labored, and likely died inside the same stone shaft 6,000 years ago. Thanks to jaw-dropping 3D facial reconstructions unveiled this month, we finally can. But here's where it gets controversial. The images don't just resurrect two Neolithic siblings. They expose the full findings published in archaeological and anthropological sciences force us to ask an uncomfortable question. Were the earliest farming communities already dividing people into the powerful and the disposable? Evidence of a life ground down by stone. Forensic anthropologists cataloged every scar and stress marker. Both women stood barely 1.5 meters tall, short even by Neolithic standards, and their spines told a harrowing story. Vertebrae worn paper-thin, arthritis blooming in their 20s, herniated discs, and fractures that had knit crookedly while the women kept swinging picks. One sister's forearm had snapped and healed at an awkward angle, suggesting she never stopped working long enough for proper recovery. And this is the part most people miss. The injuries weren't random. They match the repetitive motions of chert, flint mining, hours spent crouched in narrow tunnels hacking at stone walls. In other words, their bodies became living ledgers of exploitation. The research team bluntly concluded that the hardest labor may no longer have been done by the strongest, but by those who could most easily be forced to do it. Translation: gender, age, or low social status, not physical prowess, dictated who got sent into the dark. A grave inside the workplace, an unprecedented red flag. Across Europe, Neolithic miners were sometimes honored with rich burials. In Iberia, for instance, high-status graves filled with polished axes and jewelry celebrate the profession. Not here. The sisters were interred inside the very shaft where they extracted flint, an act without parallel in the archaeological record. The message seems unmistakable. They were considered tools, not people, and when those tools broke, they were left where they fell. Yet the burial scene is hauntingly intimate. The elder woman cradles an unrelated newborn in her arms. A partial dog skeleton lies curled nearby. No two staining from gritty mine dust. No accidental collapse. Just deliberate, ceremonial positioning. Could this have been ritual sacrifice? A symbolic offering to the earth spirits who guarded the chert? Or, more disturbingly, a punishment for some transgression we can't fathom? The controversy is wide open. DNA, diet, and the illusion of a better adulthood. Genetic analysis delivered bittersweet details. The younger sister probably had dark hair and hazel green eyes. The elder blue eyes and blonde hair, rare hues that must have stood out among her community. Isotopic tests showed that despite childhood malnutrition, both women ate a surprisingly meat-heavy diet as adults. Some scholars argue this proves they weren't entirely marginalized. Others counter that high-protein diets were simply fuel for extreme physical labor, the ancient equivalent of force-feeding athletes steroids so they can keep performing, bringing the forgotten back to life. To create the hyper-realistic faces now on display at the Moravian Museum in Brno, specialists blended forensic art with Hollywood-grade materials, silicone skin, individually punched human hair, prosthetic glass eyes, and clothing woven from flax and nettle fibers identical to Neolithic textiles recovered at nearby sites. The elder sister wears a simple plant fiber wrap and a woven hairnet. The younger, a linen blouse with braided fabric strips adorning her hair. For the first time in 6 millennia, visitors can meet the women whose bones once whispered only to archaeologists. But the reconstruction is more than a technical triumph. It's a moral mirror. We like to believe inequality is a modern disease, a side effect of industrialization or capitalism. These sisters beg to differ. Their scarred skeletons argue that exploitation has deep evolutionary roots, that even in small farming villages of 400 souls, some people were born to dig until their bodies gave out. So, what do we do with this uncomfortable knowledge? Do we rewrite the history books to emphasize the dark underbelly of the Neolithic revolution? Or do we cling to the pastoral fantasy of communal harmony? Controversial thought to chew on. If these women had lived today, would we call their treatment human trafficking, systemic oppression, or simply the price of progress? Your turn. Were the sisters victims of ritual sacrifice, expendable laborers, or both? Could early agriculture have thrived without coercing its most vulnerable members? Drop your take below. Agreement, outrage, or alternative theories welcome. Let's keep their newly rediscovered voices echoing a little longer. Hyperrealistic Stone Age sisters, 6,000-year-old miners reconstructed in 3D. Imagine the grueling lives of two Stone Age sisters who toiled in a harsh mining community over 6,000 years ago in what is now the Czech Republic. Researchers have brought these ancient women to life through stunning, hyper-realistic 3D reconstructions, offering us a glimpse into their challenging world. The sisters' remains, discovered more than 15 years ago in a prehistoric chert mine in the South Moravian region, have been meticulously analyzed. The findings suggest that these women were integral to the mining operations, extracting heavy rocks used for tools and weapons. Their story, published in the journal Archaeological and Anthropological Sciences, is both fascinating and heart-wrenching. The sisters were buried in a mining shaft, one on top of the other. The younger sister's skeleton was found 20 feet below ground, with the older sister's remains just 3 feet beneath her. Archaeologist Martin Oliva from the Moravian Museum speculates that they were likely buried where they worked, a poignant reminder of their labor-intensive lives. But here's where it gets controversial. The researchers found no evidence of violent deaths or diseases, yet they suggest the sisters might have been sacrificed or put down when they could no longer work due to injuries. This raises profound questions about the ethics and social structures of ancient communities. What do you think? Could such practices have been commonplace in prehistoric societies? The burials hold several mysteries. For instance, the sisters were buried with the remains of a small dog, whose skull was found near the top skeleton, while other bones were discovered near the bottom one. Even more puzzling was the presence of a newborn baby, whose remains lay on the older sister's chest, but had no genetic link to either woman. The child was whole, but not theirs, and there were only a few dog bones. We really cannot know why these individuals were buried together, even with the new findings, Oliva admitted. The sisters' lives were marked by hardship from a young age. Previous research had already confirmed their sibling relationship and dated them to between 4050 and 4340 BC using radiocarbon dating. The new study, which included genetic testing, microscopic examination of their teeth, and a thorough pathological examination of their skeletons, revealed that while they were well-nourished and strong in adulthood, they were poorly fed, weak, and diseased as children. Their skeletons showed signs of heavy strain, including damaged vertebrae and half-healed injuries. The older sister had a fracture on her forearm that was only partially healed.